If you could have only one citizenship and one passport in the world, what would it be? Today I'm going to break down my top 10 from number 10 to number 1. So I've thought about this recently where I said, yes, at Nomad Capitalist we believe in having dual citizenship, getting a second passport. I've recently said I really think if you're serious about diversification, you want to have triple citizenship. You want to have all the bases covered. And if you're kind of crazy, you can go my way and you can get, stack them up, 5, 6, 7 passports if you want. But 3 is the goal. But I was thinking, if you had to have one, most of us would choose a passport in terms of global mobility, in terms of good governance, in terms of tax policy, that isn't the one where we're from. So I was born in the United States. I no longer have a U.S. passport. And I made my list of 10 countries that came to mind for various reasons that if I could only have one, right now I have multiple, and I feel pretty good about that. But if I had to choose one, what would it be? So let's go through the list. The first one that came to mind is every year we publish the Nomad Passport Index. And this year the team determined through their multiple data points that the UAE, despite not being best for travel, is the best passport to hold. So the UAE, United Arab Emirates, number 1, that's on my list. Luxembourg came in number 2. So if you don't like the UAE for some reason, that's the European, the best one in Europe, number 2. It's a small country. It's in the European Union, so you've got the opportunity to live anywhere you want within the EU. That was on the list. Switzerland, great name brand. Non-EU, but obviously around the EU. So you have a lot of the benefits without some of the drawbacks in the regulation. Germany is still considered by some to be number 1. By some metrics, they do have the best travel. When you look at the best travel, one passport can go to the Central African Republic and one can't. You don't really care about that, right? But Germany, by some metrics, for travel, has the best travel document, and obviously most of the world is going to respect a German passport. Belgium, I've thought for a long time, does not take itself too seriously. Who hates the Belgians, right? Well, maybe the Germans, because they cause traffic jams, I'm told. But I kind of like the aspect of, we're not that patriotic. That could be a good passport. Norway is not only in my blood. It's one of the numerous, places where my ancestors came from. Also around Europe, but not in the EU. Obviously a very wealthy country. They've done a good job managing that wealth. There's a politeness. There's a heritage there for me personally. So that would be on the list. Lithuania, also in my heritage. EU, up and coming, but also in a part of the world that, culturally a bit different. Canada, just because I was born in the U.S., a lot of Americans think, hey, that's the better one. And at least for now, Canadians, have the greatest level of access into the U.S., other than Americans, but they don't have the worldwide taxation that they've got to deal with if they want to leave. And so that could be interesting. Ireland, I've always thought, you're in the EU, but you also have access to the UK post-Brexit. Low tax country. They kind of separate themselves a little bit from mainland Europe. Always like the people a lot. Great passport, maybe the best one in the European Union by some metrics because you still have that UK access. And then lastly, Serbia came up. And you might say, Serbia? Serbia has a very fast-growing passport. Now going to get access to Saudi Arabia. Not a lot of countries have that. They've done a great job at adding visa-free travel, not to the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. But if those countries aren't important to you, they've done an incredible job of increasing the passport. And it's, again, on the border of the EU, doesn't want to be in the EU, so there's a greater level of freedom and perhaps fewer restrictions in the future. So those are the 10. And so I said, all right, let me break it down. I am going to... Now, by the way, all these passports are obtainable. The UAE, a few hundred people a year, I understand, are basically gifted UAE nationality for making some exceptional contributions. So potentially if you were to go there and hire a ton of people and have a profile, you could be one of those. Luxembourg has a golden visa program. If you live there, it's not going to be particularly tax friendly, but you can get that by living in Luxembourg. You can also go back 3 generations if you have a Luxembourgish ancestor. Switzerland, harder to get, but you can live there. 12 years to naturalization. You have to become Swiss in nature. Germany, a little bit harder to move to, but if you were to get a job, for example, there are some ways to get into Germany. You could work towards being naturalized. They are going to shorten the timeline down to 5 years now. Belgium has made it harder to become naturalized, but if you start a Belgian-focused business, they can give you residence and you can work towards citizenship there. Norway, probably one of the harder ones. Lithuania, potentially starting a business. The language requirement and the weight could be a hard one there, so that's a little harder. Canada, relatively easy enough. Not so much of a passive income stream, but if you wanted to move to Canada and pay tax, you could get that passport faster than it than it has been in the past. Ireland, plenty of options to move there, start a business, employ yourself, friendly for foreigners. And then Serbia, naturalization. And by the way, Ireland, Serbia, Lithuania, and others, you can get if you have ancestors from there. So there are lots of ways to get these passports. But let's just assume, so you've got to consider whether they're possible. And many of these passports are possible to get with some level of effort. What I would immediately do, though, in terms of what the best passport is for me, the UAE, the tax-free status there is great if you want to live there. But there's plenty of ways to live in the UAE. You start a company, you buy a property. They're making it easier to move there. I don't think you need the citizenship, particularly given some of the restrictions on that citizenship. Germany has always been less flexible on dual. They want to open up on that, but it's partially because the government's going the wrong direction on other issues of things like tax. And again, that may not affect you long term if you live outside of the country, but eventually it might. So the UAE and Germany are out for the restrictions on dual, and just the tax stuff doesn't really go well with me. Serbia, if I had to pick only one, I'm probably going to sacrifice maybe a little bit of extra personal freedom for a little bit better passport power. Belgium seems cool, but I like the quasi lack of patriotism. I don't see the competitive advantage versus the others. Canada, I think, follows the U.S. too much, and personally, it's just not a place where I would want to live. Gone in the wrong direction in recent years, but even that notwithstanding, and I think maybe being closer, in a European area probably gives you more options. And Luxembourg, as much as I like small countries, I just don't see the value there. So I'm down to Switzerland, Norway, Lithuania, and Ireland, and you probably wouldn't choose Lithuania. But for me, being 25% Lithuanian, by the way, went through the citizenship by descent process, spent years working on that. And so for people who, Nomad Capitalist will now help you with your citizenship by descent. If that's all you want to do, we'll help you do that. Go to nomadcapitalist.com. It has taken us years to collect some of the documents I needed, only to find out, that document's not quite right. You're a year too late on your ancestors. Sorry. Okay. So that's why citizenship by descent is a little bit more complicated and why you have to pay up front, because sometimes it takes years to collect the right documents to even go and apply. But if you want our help with that, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com. So we've got Switzerland, Norway, Lithuania, and Ireland. Probably would get rid of Lithuania first. I do like the warm feeling, which is why we are offering citizenship by descent as a standalone service now. Some people just want to reconnect with the family. It feels nice, right? It's not about saving taxes. It's not about a plan B. Those things are extra, but hey, I just want to reconnect with my family tree. But yet, Lithuania, if the EU were no longer to exist, would you want to be just Lithuanian? I don't get too upset about the whole it's close to Russia thing. I mean, I think there's enough support around that, but it just probably doesn't offer quite enough. Norway, I think, again, if there's less cohesion in Europe, it's not going to be as good. Would I want to live only in Norway? Perhaps not. Also, if you were to live in Norway, there's less flexibility when you leave the country of where you have to live if you want to avoid some nasty taxes. So again, I'm probably willing to say, hey, even though it's in my blood, and even though they've done a good job on things like the Sovereign Wealth Fund, it's probably not enough to say if that's my only passport and I'm going to have, who knows what could happen for black swan events, it's probably not going to be there. Switzerland, I feel like you don't need to be a citizen, and they are relatively strict on who becomes a citizen. Again, I mean, for decades, if you have money, you can move there. And so if the issue is wanting to live there, you can do that. And if I didn't have money, I wouldn't want to live in Switzerland. I'd just spend a bunch of time in Switzerland. And not a place you want to live if you're, down to the felt. And so I think it would be close between Norway and the last man standing of Ireland. But quite frankly, I think that one of the things that you want to do once you've gotten a couple of passports for defensive purposes, for diversification purposes, is you want to make sure you have a place that you could live if you didn't want to live where you live now. I did not want to live in the United States for most of my life. If you want to live where you're from, but you're saying, hey, let me get some backups, you might start with a Caribbean citizenship by investment. Hey, some people want to live in the Caribbean. That could be the best passport for you. Hey, St. Kitts and Nevis, no personal tax, no corporate tax. Hey, that sounds fantastic. Make a donation, keep it in your back pocket as long as you want, retire to an island, pay no taxes. That could be number one for you. But for me, being able to, have somewhere where I could go and speak English, truly, with all the same colloquialisms and understanding. Norwegians do obviously speak very good English, but I think Ireland, there's a bit more of the sense of community that I would want. I like the fact that, again, you're in the EU without some of the nonsense of the EU. If you wanted to, as an Irish citizen, go and live in the UK, you could do that, even though I think that Ireland's probably a better place to live than the UK. And so I just think that probably Ireland would win out if I had to pick one passport. Again, you could argue that in realistic purposes, not that, oh, this one can go to Central African Republic and this one can't, but realistic purposes for someone who's getting a third or fourth passport, and that's the one that's going to give them the place that they can live. You choose Ireland. Now, right now, if you're Lithuanian, you can live in Ireland. You're an EU member citizen, right? Norway, you can do that. Switzerland, you can do that. So, for me, I think that at a certain point, you want to have a passport in your mix that allows you to, and if you're going to only choose one, you want to break it down to, okay, what black swan events could happen to prevent this? Again, if I'm Lithuanian, what happens if something changes? You want to have access to a place that's culturally similar to where you're from. I've spent many, many years living in places that aren't culturally similar, and I've enjoyed that. But I think knowing that you were locked out of a place that's similar to where you're from forever wouldn't be ideal. And so you can always choose to live in Dubai. You can always choose to live in Switzerland. I think probably no matter what passport that you have, as long as you can add value to those countries. Norway is a hard one to pass up. And again, you probably wouldn't add that one to your list. But I think Ireland is one. And if you're willing to live there, you can work towards Irish citizenship. I think they also honor their award more than many other European countries in granting it to you. If you have an Irish ancestor, you can get Irish citizenship without living there. I think Ireland probably today, as I sit here right now, and I've evolved over time on this, having lived in many different countries, would be the one that I would choose. But the exercise here is don't discount the feeling. Yes, have the diversification, but don't discount the feeling of you want to feel something that you connect with. And I think that as someone who's done a lot of strategic things with citizenship, banking, asset protection, etc., you do want to bring back that personal element. And so looking at your family tree, looking at places that you love. I've loved Ireland for 14 years. I think it's beautiful people. That's something that you want to look at. And so you can build your own 10, and then you can come to Nomad Capitalist and say, what am I missing here? Build me a plan that helps me get this passport, whether I want to relocate or whether I want to do so from the comfort of my home. That's what we do, because your 10 are going to be different than mine.